my wife and I obviously we're waiting on a couple weeks away from getting our new little pup, right? New little Australian Shepherd. We've got some names in mind, and every time we try to workshop the names on people like, oh, really? So we've stopped doing that because it's like, really, I would name my dog that. Thanks, Grandma. So we've been watching a lot of these dog training videos, right? And my wife Chelsea, who you know well, we were sitting there. And she's like, I really want you to be a part of this. I really want you to be a part, early on. I was like, of course. I just also think it's we're a few months away from getting a dog. And I'm like,
he's literally not even here.
Yeah, he's not here yet. So like, I'm watching training videos. I'm doing stuff. And, Australian Shepherds, the joke is that if you're not an athletic person, you're about to become one just because these things have so much damn energy. And so we're watching, she's watching a video of, this dog training video, and I go, oh, I can sit down and watch it. She's like, no, it's okay. You don't have to watch this. And I was like, but you want me to be more involved? You want me to be like, no, it's fine. It's okay. And then I realized there's a whole series of these videos she's watching, and it's just this really good looking Australian guy.
I knew it was going to be an Australian shredded dude with an 8-pack. She was like, no. Like you can come back later.
Yeah. He's sitting there. He's like, you're going to love your dog. Your dog's going to run about a bit, and he's going to give you a lot of energy there. I don't know what 4 accents I just combined, but I did it. And so I'm sitting there, this handsome son of a gun is right here. And I go,
he's going to steal my wife.
And my dog. He's going to steal my wife, my dog.
Everything you have.
This whole life in Melbourne. I don't.
You're gonna roll over, look at Chelsea's phone, and be like, why do you have a single ticket to Sydney one way? What do you know that I don't know? It is going to be funnier. It is going to be funnier though, Danny, when you guys get your dog and then Chelsea knows no way how to train it whatsoever. Like she hasn't retained anything. There's nothing that she knows. She wasn't paying attention to that at all. That's going to be funnier.
I was like, those videos came in handy. Hey, hon, there you go. I just, that's how I started my morning today. She's watching
beefing with ripped Australians.
7 Australian videos down. Good day. Welcome to Melbourne, where I work with the dogs. Crikey.
A wee bit nippy in it.
A wee bit nippy.
Wee bit nippy in it.
I remember there being like I got following this Instagram page a while ago, this Australian hockey club. And like how hockey's taking off in Australia. This wasn't meant to be the segue, but here we are. And I just remember reading an article. One of my writers, I think, Matt Austin on the site, wrote it on his blog, Hockey World blog, that like his article was like, hockey will never be the sport of Australia. And I was like, was it in the running? Like they have rugby, don't they? And they have,
they have boomerangs to worry about.
Like Kangaroo Jack's out there still. I don't know. They've handled that.
He's the 20-time world boxing champion. He's fine.
You ever see the video of the guy? There's a video.
Yes.
The kangaroo and the dog. Oh my.
Danny, I showed you that video.
Yeah, I thought so. Danny, we were at the shop.
Danny, if there's any person that I've met in real life, I have automatically gone, hey, have you seen this video of this guy punching a kangaroo in the face? And if they say no, I automatically pull it up. It's one of my first icebreakers whenever I meet someone. It's my favorite video on the internet. I can't tell you how many people I've met. And then the first day that I meet them, I automatically go into, hey, have you seen this video? It's my favorite video on the internet.
Well, I love watching it in the first moments as you see the guy get out of the truck like something's wrong. And then you just see this kangaroo who's got the guy's dog by like the neck, like he's got him like holding him hostage. And I was like, what was the kangaroo's end game? Like, what was he like wanting to trade? Like, he was like, you give me the carrots, I give you the dog. Like, what was he after? That it just ended up with a guy just confidently walking it up and punching a full-grown jacked kangaroo in the face.
Do you think that's why Chelsea thinks she needs an Australian man, because she doesn't think you could punch a kangaroo?
Yeah, and then the guy just confidently walks away. Like, he just like he punches it and he's like, that's
it's
not
even that. The best part of the video is the look on the kangaroo's face, because it's so taken aback. And it's like, dude, did I just get smoked in the snout? Like, it's so funny. I love that video. It's so good for every reason. So it's such a roller coaster of 30 seconds. I love it.
Oh, man. Welcome to E2G Hockey with Dan and Tyson. I am Dan. He is Tyson. Tyson, how are you this morning?
No Australians in my house. Kangaroo free. Living life. How about you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. The mices, the Mises seem to be gone. Getting my little
They're
pump
gone?
in. They're
They
gone.
dipped? That's
I
good.
think it was just the one, but we still have 17 traps around the house that I'm the one stepping in now. I got owned by one of these traps on my foot, and it ripped a hole straight through the sock. Just ripped it right out, and I just could imagine the torture and anguish that the mice would go through if it was in there. And I felt no pain for it because they've been keeping me up at night. That's where I'm at in this journey. Is like, if you get trapped one of these things, that's on you.
Do you think the mice are gone, or do you think they're just like repositioning, planning their attack?
Well, I hope it's more like around the fall when I'm gone. So I hope it's like a couple months of like planning, strategic planning, and then it's the next person's problem.
Not the type of guy to punch a kangaroo in the face just to kind of wait for the kangaroo to make its own decision.
I was gonna, if it were me, I would have been like, "Hey, kangaroo, let's talk this thing out. Work out in a branch of some kind. I don't know.
He's like, I just feel like we have some theoretical differences.
Should we talk hockey? Is it time to talk hockey?
I guess.
I think the best place is to start would be to talk about your favorite team. I would say you have an absolute bias that you hide fairly well,
The
but
Columbus Blue Jays.
said no one ever. Well, if we're going to talk about them, I think there's a ticking time with Patrick Laine down in Columbus, but
We're not talking about Columbus, Danny. Go back.
oh yeah,
I don't
sorry.
want to talk about Columbus.
No, Vancouver is playing again after how many weeks
Like
on?
14 hours of delay, they were shifted into an NHL game.
Jeez, it is absolutely insane how like expedited the whole process felt. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, they're cleared. Let's have all 23 guys back on the ice and going for it. And I don't think there's been a better story right now just because of how well they've played in their first two games back.
I saw people. Did you see people ripping Nylander after he scored on them?
No, really?
Nylander scored. I forget what milestone it was because they were their first game back, right? Toronto. I think what was it? Nylander scored. I think it was his 100th career goal. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it was. And he didn't do anything much, just like a normal celebration. And I did see a few people on like Twitter and Instagram ripping into him because he's like, "Oh, like how could you celebrate?" Blah 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 blah. I was like, Nylander doesn't care. I wouldn't care if I'm in the league right now and like I'm going into a game and I put the puck in the net. I'm celebrating. I don't care what type of Brazilian virus was just floating through the Canucks dressing room. I'm pumped.
It's Brazilian now? It evolved?
I thought they had the Canucks specifically had an outbreak of one of the variants. I think it was either the UK or the Brazilian variant. I could be wrong, but they specifically like the variant is what really like got the Canucks in trouble.
Got it. I didn't realize that part of the whole thing.
It's not just regular COVID, it's COVID speaking Portuguese.
Okay. No one in the dressing room. They know Russian. They know German. No one knows Portuguese.
Oh, it has a little bit of COVID in it.
It's the Australian guy. It's the Australian Melbourne variant. What you need to do here with the Australian variants is you need to take it out back and say no, bad.
Oi, blimey, take it out to Melbourne. Get a sausage dog.
Ringo Starr over there. Jeez.
Is that so like Ringo?
You sounded like a little Ringo, a little slow, a little on the uptick. It was good.
Just me and me lads, the Beatles.
I just got a song about an octopus. If I'm Nylander, there's no easy goals, and it's not like the Vancouver Canucks aren't trying. You know, they're a good, like you said, they're a good team. They're a young team, got some growing pains, but
and they're playing well. So like whatever, like you know, like they're toughing it out. I'm sure they would have liked a little bit more time, but they're playing well. I'm not super mad at it.
They're like 7-8 games behind everybody else, sure, but at the end of the day, Quinn Hughes and JT Miller and Bo Horvat, those guys are no easy contest. And I think the story itself goes to OT. Like, Nylander scored. All right, well, okay, fast forward to the end of the game. They're in overtime, and Bo Horvat puts it away for him. I thought it was one of the best stories of the year. It's like, and I really loved how the hockey community came behind in support of like Vancouver. Everybody was a Vancouver fan that night, except the Leafs fans. But the Leafs fans hate everybody and everyone that's not currently or a past Toronto Maple Leaf. And if they're not a current Maple Leaf, they want to be a Maple Leaf, and one day they'll probably be there. So
That was a very confusing sentence. I didn't follow anything.
Track that later on, and all I know is a few Leafs fans might be mad over that, but I love the Leafs to be clear. Like I want them to win again, but these fans, it's like the Toronto Maple Leafs versus everyone else in the North Division. It's like us against the world.
You're the Australian dude, and Steve Dangle's the kangaroo. You're just gonna smoke him in the face. The beef that no one knew they wanted.
Dang. Fast forward to last night. I definitely showed my age a little bit and fell asleep at 10:30 on the couch. But I was watching. Last I saw it was 2-1 Vancouver. Quinn Hughes potted one, and then they ended up winning 6-3. I thought it was great. I loved seeing that. I love seeing Vancouver not only come back and win a game. It's not like they played Ottawa, who's like a struggling franchise. They played the best team in the division, and they took 2 games from them. That's great. You talk about a team that is still, I wouldn't say they're rebuilding, but they're a few pieces away, and they're still a little young, but I like all the moves that Vancouver's made. Do you, as a biased fan, do you have any moves that you feel like the team still needs to make, or what is left for Vancouver?
I think you have help coming, and I think it's similar to the sentiment that maybe we've had with Anaheim in the past, where you have help coming. Stuff's going to get better. You have players up the wing. I think you still need a little bit more, maybe scoring depth. You don't quite have the winger depth that maybe a Toronto has, or maybe some other really young teams in the league have. But I think when you look at that roster, you're building it the right way. You have depth at wing. You have some depth at center. You have some depth at D. I think you do still need a couple, maybe one more high-end D piece. You don't have that Bowen Byram, Cale Makar quite yet. Quinn Hughes is very, very good and exceptional, but outside of that, I think it falls off a little bit. So you would like to see maybe, I think the forward group is a little bit further ahead of the D group. I would really like to see one more really, really good defenseman, and then maybe, another scoring winger that can maybe pot you 20 here or there. So I think they're very, very close, but I think a few more pieces, and they should be kind of accelerating that rebuild more than they already are now.
Quinn Hughes is an exceptional defenseman, no question, but he is more of an offensive versus. He doesn't have an excellent two-way game. He's got a great offensive game. The Hughes brothers are known for their offense more than their defense, even though two of them, we'll see what Luke Hughes has coming in, and I see him going anywhere between 1 to 5 or 2 to 5. It seems Owen Power's the universal number one. What about, are you one of these guys that's really tough on Brock Besser, or where do you stand with him?
I love Brock Besser. I think he's a great player. I think when you look through it, he's super talented. It's difficult to score in this league, and he's done it. Has he done it at the same output capacity every year? No, but I think when you look at it, he's done really well. I think that's especially when they were talking about trading him, I think that's something that isn't going to work out well. That's a trade where you get a guy out of town and then they end up scoring 40 goals or 50 goals or something like that. I think that's a little different than like a Patrick Laine situation. So I love Brock Besser. I think it's difficult. He popped off in a year when they didn't have Elias Pettersson, right? And he was really Vancouver's only real hope outside of, Bo Horvat and a couple players that have already been there. But, there's only so much puck to go around. I think now that you have a Nils Hoglander, you have Elias Pettersson, you have these players that are taking the puck away, you're obviously just not going to get as many high-scoring opportunities. I think it's rare to have a release like that when you're talking about a shot in the league.
Right.
He has it. He's a player that, you can really build around. And I think realistically, if all goes well, he can be, a perennial 40-goal scorer for you, maybe, over-under a little bit. So I love Brock Besser. I think he gets rattled on a little bit more than he should, just based off the fact that he's a great talent, and I think you wouldn't want to lose a guy like that.
Yeah, and he's still so young. He's only 24 years old, and you think about he gets a lot of that gripe that like Nylander gets in Toronto. He's that guy. He's like that scapegoat night in or night out because he doesn't have a superb two-way game that like you see it. He's a high-scoring winger. And right wing in particular, there's not too many on the right wing who have his ability.
Why? I don't see why you have to be like an exceptional two-way player when you can put pucks in the net like that. Like as long as you're not like a severe defensive liability, like I don't care if Brock Besser is taking like all of your D-zone draws every night. Like, I don't really care for the most part. That's not his job. That's not what you pay him to do. You can pay other guys to do that. As long as you're not a complete liability, I have no problem with you not having a crazy defensive game.
Do you think the hardest thing to do in the league is score?
I think the hardest thing to do in the league is score. Yeah. And especially in ways like players like Brock Besser do, I think scoring is something that don't get me wrong, you can be taught and you can improve on, but at a certain point, like, there's just a lot of intangibles that go into it. There's so many players in the league that maybe you look at and you're like, oh, like their stick handling doesn't really impress you, their skating doesn't really impress you, their shot doesn't really impress you, but they put pucks in the net. I've played with so many players like that throughout the years where nothing is really that impressive, but then they'll score 40 goals just because they're smart, they know what they're doing, they're going around. So I think scoring and goals in particular are the most valuable asset that you can have. And if you can do that consistently, I'm going to throw you a bone somewhere else around the rink.
I think that's totally fair. And I think they have the other pieces in place that Besser can just do what Besser does. Yeah, I think this is a D-heavy draft too. And if Vancouver falls into the lottery, they could find that two-way defenseman they're looking for. Again, you'd be another 2-3 years away from being that guy, and defensemen obviously take a little bit longer to get into like their stride of things, but still, not everybody's going to come in like Kale McCarr or what have you,
Carson Lambos from Winnipeg wouldn't be too bad. Hometown kid here that I'm pretty good friends with. I'd love that in Vancouver.
That'd be awesome. I remember getting kind of roasted a little bit for comments because I was breaking down what Ron Francis did in Carolina because, obviously, with him taking over Seattle, I was kind of looking at like what are his most notable moves as a GM, and I called Bean, who was drafted I think 12th overall by Carolina one year. I called him kind of I called him a little bit of a bust, right? But he's only 23 years old and he's just now kind of cracking that lineup. And fans were like, it takes a while for a defenseman. And I go, yeah, but if you look at who's around him, I think like Charlie McAvoy got drafted after him, if I believe, or a couple other players. And I was like, in relation, right? Now, a two-way defenseman, an offensive game seems to make you make that jump a little bit more. But, it sounds like you need a guy like a Bean who's a first-round talent, who's going to be that two-way defenseman, more of a shutdown D, and that's going to take a little bit more time. That was just we didn't mean to talk about Vancouver so much, but it makes sense, Like
I love it. No, we could do this every episode. I'm fine with it. We're right in my wheelhouse.
Right. There's not a team. We'll talk about the New York Rangers next week, and we'll talk about everything that I'm mad about.
It's gonna be a 3-hour episode.
Yeah, and we'll all do it in Australian accents. I think now, in terms of what's going around in the league right now, I think the seamless transition. Patrick Marleau.
Was that seamless?
Nope.
Seamless.
Just keep moving. Patrick Marleau broke one of the quote-unquote unbreakable records this week by playing in his 1,768th game in the NHL, surpassing the great Howe. So I can't believe that Gordy's record was in fact broken. I don't know. I forever Gordie Howe seemed to have like the record. He played in that's not even including WHL games. I think he played when he played for Hartford briefly. He played with his sons who were grown men at that point.
WHA, not WHL.
No, he played in the Women's Hockey League.
That's the NWHL.
No, that's the Nigerian Women's Hockey League.
You're falling apart right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, no.
The Australian guy's getting to you.
Yeah,
not as sharp as he used to be.
I just got a text. She's left me. She's on the plane. I gotta go and Ross this situation real quick and go to the airport and try to get Rachel home. He broke an unbreakable record, Patrick Marleau, and it's kind of crazy. I love that he could play that game in Vegas and people could show up and support for him. People speak so highly of his character as him being one of the premier guys as a leader around the league. He's been in the league since 1997, where he was drafted second overall behind his longtime teammate, Joe Thornton, who went first. Those two are legends, especially in San Jose. They took him to the Cup once. but they've produced, and you talk about scoring, they've scored. He has contributed in a very difficult league, and he's been rewarded by one of like an award, a record that is going to be really damn hard to break again. Like, we talk about how sports science is at a new high, and players are playing longer because there's just better equipment, better medicine, what have you, better knowledge of how to address concussion syndrome and so on and so forth. But I'm picking this information off another, podcast here, but Ryan Whitney was saying on Spit and Chicklets, he goes, here's why this record is going to be hard to break. In 23 seasons, Marleau only missed 32 games total. That's an insane stat.
Crazy.
People miss entire seasons. People miss 32 games just because in any season. Some guys year after year have that problem. In 23 seasons, when your body is dealing with that much wear and tear, 32 games. That's insane. That's why it's like he's 41 years old, so he's not playing until like he is playing past most players normally play. But for him to play at 41 and only miss that many, I that put this achievement in a new light for me.
When you're talking about, going back to kind of like what we said about Brock Besser, I view scoring as the most difficult thing to do in the league. And you look at Patrick Marleau and you look at someone who over that span has done it, whether he was an 18-year-old player or whether he was a 40-year-old player. Keep in mind, he's not scoring 40 goals anymore. He's not, as effective as he once was. But to still be a player in this league and to still be relatively effective and still be able to keep up with these guys who, let's be honest, the skill gap, relative to when Patrick Marleau first came into the league now is pretty crazy. You didn't have 18-year-old kids coming in, flying around, scoring 100 points in their first season when Patrick Marleau first came in, and now you do. So just being able to keep up with that, I think, is an achievement in and of itself, but also being able to consistently score through that in his prime, be one of the most desirable players in the NHL and be one of the most consistent performers in the NHL is a feat in and of itself. So while the games are impressive, I think being able to score consistently throughout that is also almost equally impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he only racked 80 points in a season twice. We can say that, right? 86 points in 05-06, 83 points in 09-10. And you kind of go, well, and he's been relatively consistent. He's always been in that mid 40s to 70s range otherwise, or, his PPG's been relatively consistent. And I think that's what you got with this guy, To think about Joe Thornton going number one, who is Jumbo Joe for a reason. That guy is a force and is produced at a higher level, one of the best playmakers ever to play the game. But at number two, to have a guy this consistent who's played just as long is pretty spectacular. And he's remained healthier. I don't see Thornton, I think, is in the 1600s, but I don't see him playing another 2 full years, 3 years. He could, but I think both are at this point still going for that one thing they both haven't achieved in that time, and that's a ring. So they're both ring chasing. And I think
Thornton's probably a little bit more likely than Marleau at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd say so too. I think last year with Pittsburgh was a good opportunity for him. When he went to go, the best thing I think he did in his career at one point was when he went to Toronto and started mentoring Matthews and Marner at their young age. I mean, for him to bestow that wisdom, to let them live in his home, it's a class act. He treated them like sons because he could have legally been their parents. He could have adopted them if he wanted. I think he's a class act, and I think he should be recognized for that. But here's my question, and this isn't the most tactful question, especially you want to celebrate the person, but you kind of go,
I know where this is going, and I love it.
Is this you want this record to live on, right? You want to celebrate a great person, but is it enough for him to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame? The only award he's ever been up for was the Lady Byng, and he didn't win that. But he was in contention for it. Didn't win a Stanley Cup. Never won a scoring title. Again, only broken 80 points twice. Only cracked 40 goals once. In 1,768 games, he has 566 goals, 630 assists, 1,196 points. everybody who's right directly behind him in terms of games played, Howe, Yager, I think Ron Francis, they all have significantly more points, right? So my question is, in your mind, Tyson, and I guess in our listeners' mind, and I guess I'm still trying to work through it, is this accomplishment, this achievement, enough to propel Patrick Marleau into the Hockey Hall of Fame?
I don't think he's first ballot, but I think he definitely gets in. I don't think this is something where whether he retires this year, the next, or whatever it is, I don't think he's automatically going in. I think it's 2 years after you can be on first ballot. I forget the exact eligibility of the Hockey Hall of Fame, but I don't think he's going in first ballot. I think it's probably something where he will get in. I think he has gathered a lot of respect around the league and recognition. And, while he may not have the individual hardware, he's incredibly well respected. And it's been very well known what Patrick Marleau has done. So I think he ends up probably getting in a year where maybe the ballot isn't as stacked and there's not as many, outstanding names that you can kind of throw on there. So I definitely think he gets in, but I think it's probably a little longer than we'd expect. What do you think?
I think there's going to be a lot of people advocating for him to get in. I think you're going to hear Thornton. You're going to hear the Leafs guys. You're going to hear a lot of guys who played with him over that time. He's just a class act, and people want that recognized and be, immortalized in hockey legacy. The question is, how much stake do we as a community put behind this individual achievement, right? Because if he didn't break that record, I don't think he would be in, If he were to play 1,600 games and have similar stats, I don't think he would, because I think there's other guys ahead of him that aren't in yet that could be recognized. Jeremy Roenick, Pierre Bergeron, Curtis Joseph, Cujo. There's guys that, you could say, like, why aren't you in? So I kind of question it a little bit, but the question would be, how much stock do we collectively put behind this award, this achievement? I could see him being on a list of questionables. The other things that'll help Marleau's case is that he's got 2 gold medals with Canada, 2010 and 2014. But those are really his only major accolades. So I'm going to say this. I'll say this. I don't think he should be in. Okay.
You don't think he should be in?
I don't think. Let's go with that.
That's a hot take.
Yeah.
Why? Do you need that individual hardware?
I think there's guys who've done more who haven't been there. Even like an Alexander McGillney who didn't play nearly as long, but won 2 cups in that time and is still a point per game performer. And what he did was one of the first players to come over from Russia. I think there's things like that should be recognized ahead of, there's a couple guys in there that I don't think should be in there. Like, I don't think like Eric Lindros should be in the Hall of Fame. What did Lindros win? There's questions like that I have, At the
end of the day too, Danny, I think you need to keep in mind that it's a team sport and it's difficult to win a championship in this league. Marleau has been put in those positions. San Jose has had runs and then his team has underperformed. He's normally been pretty good on all those runs where maybe they, lose to Vancouver in a conference final in 2011 or, they lose to Pittsburgh in a cup final. I think it's difficult. You're put into those spots and there's so many other factors. Think about how strong the West was when he was in his prime too, the type of competition that he had to go through, so many good teams. I think hardware is important, but I think you need to look at the grand scope a little bit more. And while, yeah, he's not the, greatest goal scorer of all time, he was very consistent. The games played is nothing to scoff at. I think you really do need to recognize that and understand that and appreciate that. So while I get the point that you're making, I just think there's a lot on this stat page that makes this pretty appealing to get him in at some point.
At some point, I could see if there being hell, you give him an award even, but I don't know. There's that line of like the Hall of Fame versus the Hall of really good, is this enough to be in that Hall of Fame versus, is he Hall of really good, or the Hall of a good guy, I don't know. I would like to see a few guys get in there ahead of him. I think if on character alone, he should be in. There's no question on that. But I think some hardware and some awards matter, especially over 23 years in the league. For that, I think it kind of says something more. It's like we had a larger sample size to see what you were capable of, and you had more opportunities than anybody else to win a cup. You had more opportunities than anybody else to win a scoring title, to win, a Richard. You have the chances more than anybody else, and you rarely finished I don't think you finished in the top 5 in scoring, maybe ever, maybe in just in goals in 9-10, but I that's just my philosophy. I think there's gonna be people who are on both sides of this conversation, and I just don't want Jumbo Joe showing up naked at my doorstep, mad about what I said. But I mean, it'd be a great story. So sure,
that's my dream outcome. I think you look at it, and the NHL really respects longevity, and it's also just a sexy title saying that Patrick Marleau broke Gordie Howe's record, and we're going to put him into the Hall of Fame. So while I see your argument, I think, fortunately or unfortunately, there are a lot of other factors at work outside of on-ice play that I think ends up allowing him to get in. I could be wrong, but I see this as something that the Hall considers and the selection committee considers, and he ends up getting it. But I get the points you're making.
Is there a player that's not in the Hall right now that you feel should be, like, more than others?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that for a little bit. Who's your guy? Is McGillney your guy?
I think McGillney is. I really, 2 Stanley Cups, insane seasons, just insane production in Buffalo, and then in New Jersey, they're totally different structured teams as well. That's what I loved about that, is Buffalo and how Buffalo was orchestrated, and how New Jersey, who was a defense first team, he still succeeded, and he still, is towards the end of his career, but he's kind of got that Pavel Bure asked to him. Yeah, in 990 games, he's got 2 Stanley Cups, 1,032 points. He played for the Sabres, the Canucks, the Devils, and the Leafs. And and 92-93, yes, the 90s were a ridiculous scoring time, right? But in 77 games, he had 76 goals. That's insane. 127 points. And then when he was with Vancouver in 95-96, turned around and had a 55. Injuries plagued him.
Going back to your Marleau point, and saying that, the 90s were a joke and whatever, I think it's very valid to understand too that while Patrick Marleau was in his prime, hockey evolved. And say what you want about his abilities now, but he was able to keep up and evolve. I will always give that to guys. I think we haven't seen players like Connor McDavid have to evolve, because they came in and they kind of were the new meta player, and changed the way that hockey was played, kind of just coinciding with the new youth movement and all the skill that was injected into the game. I think there's something to say about the fact that Marleau was able to play and be an effective player in a league where everyone was scoring. It was clutch and grab. It was very difficult. You had to really grind for your points. And then you're able to keep up with the guys that are skating, around the ice 4 times in 10 seconds. I think I get your point. I like the McGillney point, but just to go back, I see that as a very big point. Hockey, more than any other major sport, has evolved massively over the last 2 decades, and Marleau is able to kind of stay at the forefront of that.
I'd like to correct and say real quick that he went to the Stanley Cup Finals, I believe, twice, but he only got 1 Stanley Cup.
Well, stat correction. Your argument's falling apart here, Dan.
Yeah, falling through the hole. So 76 goals really were didn't mean anything.
Dude, I could pot 50 in the 90s.
Yeah.
I could have easily popped 20, and I was -4 back then.
Oh, they'd also clothesline you. You'd get murdered 100%. In the 90s.
Oh, I'd have post-concussion for sure right now. But I already do, so it's kind of a wash either way.
Yeah, my knees are dead. So, and that was blown out by my childhood teammate, Kenny Roberts. On the first time I ever met him, just took out my knees. I remember being as a kid going, oh, that's not supposed to do that. I iced both my knees because of him. He took out my left knee, and then the next drill, he took out my right knee.
I think the world was just telling you that you weren't really meant to be like a peak performance athlete.
In my mind, In my mind, I still am. So I don't know what the issue is. I don't understand this.
Your wife and the population of Australia may think a little differently.
Hey, look, I'm about to get an Australian Shepherd, and again, I'm about to become a super athlete. Okay, you think I got to keep up with this little pup who's got more energy than the Energizer Bunny?
I think you think that you're going to get an 8-pack out of this, but realistically, you're probably just going to get like really big calves.
I'll take those calves, dude.
Those mailman calves.
I want to. What can Brown do for you? Kicking down doors. There's that. I don't know. One of my favorite jokes from comedians I don't like, Dane Cook. He was like, he does. I want to do a B&E, a breaking and entering, and he's like, kicks down the door. He's like, I realized I just really wanted to kick down a door. I didn't want to steal anything. I just wanted to kick a door in. That's really what it is. That's what I want to achieve. I want calves that I can, thanks to my little pup, that I can just kick down a door and then run away. But we have cameras everywhere, so what good is that? Anyway, let's look back a week ago now. It's a little over a week now since the NHL Trade Deadline. And I'm sure you all listened to our Better Late Than Never podcast take on the NHL Trade Deadline. But I think it's a good time to analyze some of these moves that have transpired and like who's really adapted to their club and who's been kind of a miss, So let's play that game called Best Trade and Worst Trade. I think Tyson, we want to start off. We want to start best or worst?
I think we should start off worst because I think we agree, and then you didn't tell me your best, so I'm a little curious. So I think that's when it'll get a little bit more spicy. So I think we should start with our worst, and then we'll go into best because I don't know your best yet.
Okay, go ahead with your pick.
Seamless transition. Thank you for throwing me the ball, Danny. Appreciate that. I think you'll agree with me, the worst trade of the trade deadline. Maybe not the worst trade, but I think in terms of the value that was thrown around and all the hype and everything, I think it was pound for pound the worst trade was David Savard to Tampa. I think you look at it and we were kind of already confused by the deal and going through it. And to be honest, I haven't been super impressed by David Savard. I think it is a cold take that you did, that you said that David Savard is better than Taylor Hall, which we can get into, but I always thought that was spicy. I thought it was spicy when you said it. You can get into the analytics a little bit more, but I don't know why you needed to make this deal. I feel like there's no way it was going to work out how it should have.
Well, I think we first got to address the better than Taylor Hall. I think at the time, David Savard was playing better than Taylor Hall. Historically,
but you knew he was going to be even 2 goals. Taylor Hall, you knew that wasn't a 2-goal scorer.
No, I knew that, and that's why I was still baffled at what Buffalo lost him for. And I get it. Buffalo had their hands tied by Taylor Hall and by the market itself. Basically, Taylor Hall is like, "Hey, I don't care if you're getting offered 4 first-round picks. I'm not going back to Arizona. I am going to Boston, make that Boston trade happen." And then Boston was like, "Hey, we know here's what our best offer." That's probably what happened. And so I can't fault Buffalo on that one. They still got something, for a guy they should have gotten more. But David Savard, cap retention. Oh, you can have him now. In 4 games, he's -3. He's playing far more minutes than he was in Columbus. I think he was averaging like 19 minutes in Columbus, and now he's averaging 21 plus a night. It's a lot. And his Corsi and Fenwick scores are a little bit inflated right now because he basically Corsi and Fenwick was about, when you to like sum it up, is essentially it's like time on ice, when you're on the ice, how much of the play takes place in the offensive zone. And it's because he's playing on a team that is just significantly better. You have some of the best offensive talent in the league, right? So he's beginning every shift in the offensive zone. It's like I saw a stat where he begins 61% of his shifts in the offensive zone. So for him to be -3 still on that's a concern. No points, and I'm not expecting him to pop goals and assists, but I expect him to not get scored on. So I think in terms, I can agree with David Savard just because of what was given up. I agree with you. I still am confused by the Janmark trade. I think they gave up too much for that too. I don't think it's the worst trade. I think the worst trade right now might be the Savard trade, but he could prove us wrong in a week,
He probably will. He'll probably score a Hattie next week and then make us look bad. So hey, I'm open to it. I'm ready for it.
David Savard. All right. Now let's go to the fun ones here. What is your best trade?
You can't do that. You're not telling me. You're telling me it's a secret. You have to tell me yours. You know mine, so you know that we don't have the same one.
Is yours Taylor Hall?
I think mine is Anthony Mantha.
Really?
Taylor Hall is pretty close. I think Taylor Hall will probably be the best buy. I think right now, today, Anthony Mantha is my favorite buy. I don't know why you ever traded for why Detroit traded away Anthony Mantha. I love him. He's a big body. He can score. He was drafted late because of some issues already, and then he ended up being a player and has been unbelievable. And I think he has a goal in every single game since joining Washington. He's played a couple. So he's a guy, I think in his last 5, he has 5 goals. So he's been unbelievable. He's been really, really good. I love Mantha. I think when you're looking at a league that has kind of, goal scoring is at the center of it. We talked earlier about how important and how difficult it is to score goals in this league. That's a guy that can do it on a roster that's already pretty dangerous. So I love that deal.
Yeah, 4 games, 4 goals and an assist, 5 points. Somehow he's still a -1, but and he's a 1 goal away from his 100th. So there's that. He'll have, if he does it right, he'll have 100 goals and 100 assists in 306 games played. Like I like Mantha's. I think it's a great trade. I think, but for what I still go for what Washington gave up, I'm not behind it as the best trade. I think he might be the best performing player currently.
Yeah, I get that.
My favorite trade, what I think the best trade is Sam Bennett to Florida.
Ooh, sneaky. I wasn't even thinking about that. He's been good.
He got 2 goals last night. 2 goals last night. So what I love about Bennett is that he brings some needed grit to that Florida team. And he's you got Gudaz, you got guys that, but
you saw that one hit he laid out? Was it last game or the game before? He smoked that guy. So
in 3 games played, he has 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points, same as Mantha, 17 penalty minutes.
Oof.
And it's a +7 in 3 games. He has taken this opportunity to a new level. He said, get me out of Calgary. He went down to Miami. And what I loved is that he scored a goal. Somebody, I forget who got wrecked. And then he jumps in, gets a game misconduct for instigating a fight for retaliating on that hit, and gets 17 penalty. All those 17 penalty minutes came at once. Game misconduct, 2 for instigating, 5 for fighting. I love that. It says, hey, you can't take a run at Barkov. You can't take a run at Huberdeau. You can't take a run at our skill guys, because Sam Bennett, who has just as much skill, will challenge you. I think that, and for a second and a second round prospect, I think he has been my favorite trade so far. I love watching Bennett play.
As we said, I think it was last episode, I love Bennett. I loved him ever since he was in junior, and I love that pick for Calgary. I think it just didn't work out. I knew that, and hopefully he keeps up this trend, but how often do you see a player that's in a major market, doesn't necessarily have to be a Canadian, but a major market, a little scrutinized, maybe doesn't perform up to what he was anticipated to perform to, and then they go to a minor market and really hit it off. I see that as a really sneaky good pick for the Panthers, and hopefully he keeps it up, because I love Sam Bennett.
I think that's my steal of the draft so far. I'm still waiting on a lot of those Canadian players, the guys who went north to play. I'm still waiting on Foligno, still waiting on Nash to get his opportunity. Those are the guys that I'm still waiting to hear from, so they could sneak in. But right now they're not going to be able to play until Thursday night. So
that'll be interesting to see. I think I'm very excited to see that Toronto roster.
Yeah, and they need it right now after these past 2 losses to Vancouver. Who's that guy who's going to say, nope, you can't, we just got to make it more difficult. Yeah, you have the skill guys, but who's going to be the guy that's going to be hard to play against? So this is all we had scheduled for the podcast today. This was supposed to be a shorter one, but I have one more thing that I want to throw at you last second.
Oh.
One of the things that is quickly being debated around the league that Twitter is getting all over. By the way, you can follow us at E2G Hockey. And Tyson and I will chirp back if you talk some smack about our picks here. So follow us on Twitter at E2G Hockey and follow us at our individual accounts as well if you like us at all. But you don't have to because not many people like Tyson and a lot less people like me.
No one likes me.
Yeah. So there you go. Like negative people like me.
Danny's wife doesn't even like him.
She's in Australia. I haven't seen her in hours. She said she was going out to work today. I realized that she works from home, so I don't know what office this is.
She's putting some shrimp on the bobby.
So here's the debate right now. Who is the number 2 best player in the NHL? I think we can all unanimously agree that McDavid is the best player. But I'm going to ask you now, not only to give me your number 2, give me your top 5 right now. On the spot.
You think McDavid's the best player?
Yeah. No question.
Might be no question. I don't think it's as far away. I think Austin Matthews is very, very close. If I'm starting my team tomorrow, I'm thinking about that decision.
I'm going to disagree with you entirely because I think McDavid's two-way game is superior. Far and away superior. I think Matthews' offensive game is on par, and his release might be the best in the league. But I'm saying the two-way game, McDavid, no question, because here's the thing as well. If you look at the positional, here's a big argument that I saw is that Matthews may be a centerman, but he plays more like a wing. Marner actually plays more of the center roles on the ice, right? So if you remove that Marner from the equation, I'm curious, but McDavid is a pure center. So Matthews isn't even my number 2. Matthews is my 3.
That's disgraceful, but we'll get it. We'll get into we'll do mine, but I still think 8 to 9 times out of 10 I probably take McDavid, but that's an interesting conversation. I think if you go into that, Matthews is definitely my number 2. I love Austin. I think when you're looking to build a franchise, I don't know if you can pick a better player than Austin Matthews. That may be the prototypical player that you pick. He's big-bodied. He can shoot. He can pass. He can score. He makes your team better. I have that as my faraway number 2. I'll have to think about the rest of the list. I still have Crosby at 3. Whether or not he's as effective, whether or not you have the 3rd best player in the league, until someone can do what Sid can do, and Sid is even half as effective as he's been, Sid is at least top 3, top 5 in my mind.
I have Sid at 5. And I think you're kind of crazy because I think there's a huge jump between 4 and 5.
All right, tell me your list.
Here's my list. McDavid is 1. Matthews is 3. At 2, Nathan McKinnon. Number 4, Leon Draisaitl. 5, Crosby.
I don't hate it.
I can give you, and here's the thing. Nikita Kucherov has been injured. So when healthy, Kucherov, are you going to tell me he's not in the top 5?
Kucherov is good. I just don't know if he does enough compared to some of these other players to make your team better. When I'm talking about like the best players in the league, I'm looking at players that make their whole team better. Tampa's a wagon. We kind of know that. You have your Braden Points. You have your other players who are dominating. I don't know if Kucherov is unbelievable. In some years, he may be the best player in the league. I like that list. I'm going to come in a little controversial here. Right. I'm going to go McDavid 1, Matthews 2. I like McKinnon at 3. I think I'll probably be a little conservative and bump Crosby down from 3 and probably put Crosby 4 just out of respect, but realistically, it's probably closer to 5. And then I'm going to put Mitch Marner at the 5 slot.
Wow, you're going to bump him up that high.
It goes back to that point too. I do think Toronto's a great team. Mitch Marner, pound for pound, for me, is one of the best players in the game. I'm definitely not mad at your pick, and I get the Draisaitl pick. I'm curious how effective Draisaitl, and they have played separately, and they do, but there's still a lot going on. It's close. I love Draisaitl for me, I'd have to look at the list, but he might be 6 outside looking in. I love Marner. I think when you're looking at the metric of making your team better, there are few guys in the league that can undress a team and, make a play or, score a goal, assist, or anything like that. But Mitch Marner makes the Leafs better every time he's on the ice. And that's a big contributing factor for me.
I like that pick a lot. I will tell you, I think I have him 11th on my overall list. Oof. I did a full list.
That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful.
You got to look at who's ahead of him. Do you know who I hear is? I've heard this name thrown up a lot as maybe even a number 2 best, and I'm curious because I think they're crazy. But people have said Mark Stone could be the number 2 best player in the league right now.
I don't like what's best to me. Like, I love Mark Stone, and there is an argument that pound for pound he is like the most complete NHL player, and in terms of puck possession, and I think it depends on how you look at it. Yeah, can someone probably make an argument that Mark Stone is better than Connor McDavid? Okay, like in terms of what, more effective, whatever, I get it. I tell you, there's 31 going to be 32 teams in the league that if they had that choice, they would take Connor McDavid over Mark Stone. So it's a good argument, and I love Mark Stone. I think he's an animal. I think he's a puck possession monster. I think he's a takeaway monster, but at a certain point, there's only a few guys that can do the offensive things that these guys can do. And you look at guys to get better like that. Crosby wasn't this complete player when he came into the league. He wasn't this guy that, he was good in the corners, but he grinds guys down a lot more than he did when he first came into the league. And the first time he came into the league, he was very McDavid-esque. He was skating through guys. He was stick handling through guys. That's really what he was. And as the game kind of sped up and he had to keep up with that, then he got a lot better at kind of leaning into guys and being strong and everything like that. So I get it. I love Mark Stone, but to me, when you have your players like your Nathan McKinnon, your Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, they do things that other players can't, and I hold that at a really high value.
I agree. I think Stone is a master of doing the things that go unseen or go unrecognized. And so a lot of times when we talk about Mark Stone and, it's like a Ryan O'Reilly as well, these guys are the type of guys that are making contributions that you really have to look for. And then you have to be even on the ice to see, like teammates tout these guys, but you're going to miss a lot of the details,
If I was following my heart, Ryan O'Reilly would be my number 1 pick, but I don't think I'd be being truthful to myself. But I love Ryan O'Reilly. He's my favorite player in the league. Probably second favorite next to Sid, but he's my favorite player in the league.
I think he's one of my favorites to watch, but I think he's outside my top 20.
He might crack my top 10, top 15. He is unbelievably.
Yes, he is.
Because he's so good two-way, he gets slept on offensively. You look at the videos of this guy training in the off season, on ice and off ice. He's an animal. I think if he really wanted to be, he could be a top 10 offensive player in this league, but it's just not how he's built.
No, he is a Stanley Cup leading player, no question, because he did it. There you go. But I think we're not even including the guys like we haven't mentioned, like Victor Hedman, Vasilevsky.
Yeah, that's true.
I have Cale Makar in my top 20 at this point, just because I know the sample size is small, but that skating is unreal.
I get it, but I get it. I think top 20 isn't as crazy as top 10. I also will never put a goalie on my top 5. I don't care. Like the only time you could ever do that is Carey Price when he won the Hart, whatever, 2015 or something like that. So
right.
I get it. There's a lot of good players. Yeah, I'm a little bit less mad. Cale Makar, I don't think makes my top 10. I would much rather put a player like Victor Hedman in there, someone that's done it and been dominant. I also think Victor Hedman can make – Cale Makar came into a pretty good system. You know what I mean? Like his team is good. Everything's solid. Right. Victor Hedman came in when Tampa was in transition. They were good, but I think you look at the intangibles with Hedman. He can do very similar things to Makar. He can, skate through guys. He's also just so strong. He's the type of defenseman that you want to build a franchise around. I think not now, but I think like a Drew Doughty in his prime, where I think that's where Makar needs to get a little bit more. And when Makar can get to kind of how Drew Doughty was when LA was winning all those cups, I think that's when it'll be a little bit more of a fair value where, Drew Doughty in his prime, and he's still effective now, but you look at a guy that could shut down the best players in the league and then go down and, score. So I think Makar's getting there, but to me, man, like a guy like Victor Hedman, that's who you want as your number one defenseman for right today now.
Right. So we're going to exclude some of these names, just a few out there, the Patty Kanes, the Artemi Panarins, the Pasternaks, the Barkovs, the Marchands. These are the guys. So let's look at for a definitive reason right now. My top 5: McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews, Draisaitl, Crosby. Tyson, are you sticking with your initial list?
Yeah, I go McDavid, Matthews. I think I go McKinnon, and then I go Crosby, Marner. That's what I'm sticking with.
I love that Marner pick. I do. I think it's sneaky good. All right, I think that's a good way to end the episode. I have to go find my herding dog to go bring my wife back to
save my family.
I have to go fight for my honor and reclaim my throne as a proper husband. So I have to book a plane ticket. So I'll be back hopefully by next week.
If we see next week's episode recorded in a Motel 6, mind your business, everyone. Danny's going to be going through a lot.
This has been E2G Hockey. I am Dan. He is Tyson. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back.